Hello, my name is Buki Fatona. I am a doctoral researcher at the University of Oxford. Welcome to Phil-Sci-Theo, an 8-part discussion series on topics in the intersect of philosophy of science and religion. For Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant, a human being is of infinite worth. What does he mean by this?
I think that's a great question. I think it's a really interesting question, as well as being a very difficult question. Part of the reason that it's such an interesting question is, for me personally, is that I think of Kant as the philosopher above all others who really wrestled with the finite nature of human beings and tried to come to terms with our limitations and tried to explore our limitations. And those limitations, in one form or another, are at the very heart of Kant's system. And yet, despite all of that, he also passionately believed that there was this infinite dimension to us as well. And that's part of what makes Kant's philosophy so exciting and so interesting. There are these conflicting aspects to a human being, and a large part of Kant's philosophy is concerned with the reconciliation of these conflicting aspects. And your question is a question about the infinite side. And Kant believed that although we were animals, and that was a large part of the reason why we were finite, animals are finite, limited creatures, although we were animals just like cats and dogs, we were nevertheless animals that differed from others in one crucial respect, and that's to say we are rational animals. Unlike cats and dogs, we have this capacity to reason, and it's our rationality that not only distinguishes us from the rest of the animal kingdom, but also, in Kant's view, gives us a kind of infinite value. It's something that we share with one another. We each of us exhibit the same rationality, but it's also a feature of each of us individually, because it's for each of us to decide how to exercise that rationality. So it's both playing a significant role in terms of explaining how we work together as a community, and also playing a significant role in explaining how we operate as individuals. And it's rationality for Kant that is the one thing that is of ultimate value. And this is reflected in the fact that one of Kant's formulations of the most fundamental moral principle is that we should always treat one another with complete respect. We should always treat one another as ends in themselves, never merely as means. And basically what's going on there is that Kant is saying, look, I, as a rational being, have to respect your rationality as well. This is something that in a way is almost a manifestation of my self-respect, because the rationality that I have is the rationality that you have as well. And this is supremely valuable. I'm supremely valuable. You're supremely valuable. I have to acknowledge your supreme value as well as my own. So this is an idea that's at the very heart of Kant's ethics, at the very heart of Kant's moral philosophy. And infinite value in this context, or infinite worth in this context, pretty much means what it says on the tin. You know, nothing else is more important. Nothing else matters more. Any of the other things that people might think matter, like happiness, or achievements of various kinds, they do have value. Kant doesn't mind admitting that they have value, but their value is completely eclipsed by the value that attaches to a rational being as a rational being.
Thank you. That actually clarifies an aspect of Kantian ethics that I previously didn't know about, which is what motivates it, and also helps me realize why he thinks his idea of categorical imperative carries weight. Is because of the value he places on rationality.
Maybe I can just say one other thing about that, actually, which is that another famous formulation of the fundamental moral principle that Kant gave was that you should always act according to principles that you think could apply to everybody. So if I'm about to tell a lie, for example, or if I'm tempted to tell a lie, Kant believed I should stop and ask myself, well, hold on, what would it be like if everybody did that? If everybody lied when it suited them, and let's imagine that that's what I'm now tempted to do, eventually the whole institution of making assertions would disintegrate. Nobody would believe anybody else, and nobody would know how to take it when somebody else said something. So it was Kant's view that it was fundamentally wrong to lie, because you couldn't accept that as a principle that was suitable for governing everybody else's reactions. Now, why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant for the same reason that we were considering earlier. I mean, if it's okay for me to exercise my rationality in that way, then it should be okay for you to exercise your rationality in that way, because all that's at stake here is how rationality is being exercised. And if it's okay for you to do it, it's okay for anybody else to do it. It would be okay for all our listeners to do it as well. So if it is acceptable for me to lie, it ought to be possible for me to envisage that as an acceptable general principle governing everybody's behaviour. But no, says Kant, that would undermine itself. And so therefore I had better think twice about what I'm about to do as well. So you begin to see a connection between these various different formulations of the fundamental moral principle.
Yes, thank you. Kant is a theist, and so in ascribing absolute worth to humans, is he influenced by a religious understanding of the infinite?
I think there is a connection. But I think that in many ways it goes the other way round. The thing that probably was axiomatic for Kant, the thing that he took to be absolutely self-evident and non-negotiable, was the infinite worth of each human being. That's his starting point. And that's something that I think he thinks we should all recognise. whether we're religious or not, whether we have any kind of religious understanding of this or not. Now, as it happens, Kant did himself want to make room for religious ideas as well, but it's quite significant that they come in playing a secondary role rather than a primary role. It's his ethics and his understanding of human worth that's primary. And religious ideas are important for Kant, but only as a way of trying to sustain that. He believes that if we think in religious terms, that can be a useful prop for thinking properly in ethical terms. But it definitely goes that way round. So, I mean, one way to make this graphic is in terms of an old puzzle that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks, what's often called the Euthyphro puzzle. And the reason that it's called the Euthyphro puzzle is that it was discussed by Plato in one of his dialogues called the Euthyphro. And the way that the puzzle arises in that context is whether we're supposed to think that the gods love what is pious because it's pious, or whether what is pious because the gods love it. And we could put the same sort of question to Kant. Does God recognize the infinite value of human beings because they're of infinite value, or is it the other way round? Are human beings of infinite value because that's what God thinks? And Kant himself would have a clear answer to that question. God is secondary at this point. Human beings are of infinite value, and even God has to recognize that. So, as I say, there's a sense in which the religious dimension for Kant is playing a very secondary role, and that's one of the distinctive things about Kant's philosophy of religion, because that sets him apart from a lot of other people who have engaged in the philosophy of religion.
Thank you. By bringing us back to Plato, we've come full circle, and it's a great place to end. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. I've very much enjoyed the discussion as well.